How is everyone? Good? I must admit, I was expecting somebody to say fine. It's become an almost automatic response, hasn't it? I wonder if any of you can relate to this situation. When you've said that you're feeling fine or even good, but actually the only thing that's got you through the week is this. Whilst you're thinking about it, I'd like to share a story with you. About 10 years ago, there was a girl of African Indian origin who came from a small Welsh Valleys town. At the age of 24, she decided to follow her dreams of moving to sunny Sydney, Australia. She quickly found a high-powered, high-paid job working with A-list celebrities like Angelina Jolie. Sounds cool, right? Only there was a problem. She wasn't happy. Maybe some of you can relate to this. When you've experienced a time when everything appeared perfect, but something deep inside didn't feel right. She started to experience anxiety and depression, which was fueled by the attitude of society that told her to repress her feelings and just get on with it like everybody else. She became more chaotic, drinking more, partying, anything she could to avoid her internal conflict and true self from peeping its head out. Eventually, she got so chaotic and irresponsible, she found herself in the middle of Sydney, so drunk and lost, both physically and mentally, with no idea of how to get home. And she decided to consciously reevaluate her life and accept that moving to the other side of the world to follow her dreams was just that, a dream created by her false perceptions of the world and herself. Who am I? If I can't be happy with all of this, what can I be happy with? This extremely challenging question pushed her to leave her high-profile lifestyle and reroute on a journey of internal and external exploration, lasting over 10 years across 5 continents and more cultures than she could even remember. That girl is me. What do you think is the biggest health issue in the world? A lot of people think that it's physical things, like cancer, but actually, according to the World Health Organization, it's mental health, which affects 1 in 4 people. So, according to this figure, all of us in this room today and watching at home will be affected by mental health either directly or indirectly. However, 9 out of 10 people with mental health issues face stigma and discrimination. Even Prince Harry has spoken out about how he was too embarrassed to talk about depression following his mother's death. This not only affects the individual, it also affects society. A recent independent health commission estimated costs the British economy in the region of £100 billion a year. According to the UN, that's 4 times more the amount needed to end world hunger. So what do you think creates this stigma? One of the biggest myths about mental health is that it's a weakness. It means you're flawed. How many of you have heard that before? I can see some of you smiling and nodding your head. And it's exactly this mindset that I want to challenge in my talk today. Psychological breakdowns have existed since the beginning of time, transcending country, age, and wealth. In indigenous cultures, it's seen as a sign of strength and spiritual awakening. So why do we in the modern world see it as weakness? Sometimes even laugh about it. You might have heard of self-deprecating jokes like this before. My new midlife crisis, blaming family, and running away. Maybe had a little laugh yourself. I know I have. Us Brits love a bit of sarcasm after all. But what are the consequences of this? The NHS describes a midlife crisis as a distressing experience that can cause irreversible mental health problems, not to mention the social problems. Yet we as a society are more likely to laugh about it than treat it as a serious issue that deserves our time and attention. I wonder how many of you have experienced this before, when you've been trying to share a problem with a loved one. Well, I am listening. Doesn't feel very nice, does it? Being put second place to a piece of plastic. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we put down our mobile phones and any other distraction and listened wholeheartedly and empathetically? After all, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You might be wondering by this point who I am. Maybe a psychologist or a social worker. I'm neither. No fancy title or letters after my name. I'm just a normal, everyday person. But like some of you here today, I've experienced mental health issues. And I hope that by sharing with you my alternative approach to what my friends call a quarter-life crisis, I can inspire some of you to improve your own mental health. If my experience is anything to go by, not only will it strengthen your relationships, it'll also improve your productivity and your true happiness. The most important thing that I learned from my journey of self-discovery was to open my heart and mind, finding happiness in the little wonders of the world that we only notice when we pay attention to the present. Maybe you can try it with me now. What are you enjoying about this present moment? Hopefully you're not thinking, well, it's a break from the screaming kids. When I really think about it, there's something beautiful about this mysterious connection that we're forming right here, right now, that makes this ordinary moment really quite extraordinary. My first life-changing experience was in Tasmania. I stayed in a little wooden cabin, and the only other guest was a rustic, toothless man. He caught my attention because of his slightly unconventional appearance that was a little scary. I caught his attention because I was trekking around the snowy mountains in a miniskirt. I told him how I'd come to Tasmania to find myself, but my suitcase, which was full of high heels, dresses, and most importantly, hair straighteners, was too heavy, so I left it in the hostel room in Hobart. He looked at me and laughed. You do realise it's not going to be there when you get back, don't you? What? Of course, that hostel is used by people like me, the vagrants of society. But don't look so sad. You don't need those things. What exactly do you plan on doing with high heels and hair straighteners on your journey of self-discovery? My ego hoisted its ugly head. No, I do need them. They're very important to me. When I got back to the hostel, my suitcase was still there. But I slowly realized this wise and mysterious man was right. These material items were causing me a burden, both physically and mentally. After offloading them onto people who could actually use them, I felt a big sigh of relief, and my first taste of real freedom. In the words of Jim Carrey, I hope everybody gets to experience all the fame and fortune they ever wanted, so that they realize it's not the answer. My travels in Latin America taught me to open my heart and love myself unconditionally. I initially felt very uncomfortable being called princesa and muy especial. I rejected it. I wasn't a princess, and I wasn't special. I certainly wasn't stupid enough to fall for such lies. Then one day, I asked a friend why men here kept saying this. He looked me deeply in the eyes and said, "You trust me, right?" "Of course," I replied. "You are beautiful. I mean, sure, you have a wonky nose, but it's unique. And more important, what makes you special is your heart that reveals itself in every characteristic of your face." He took me to a mirror, and the first thing I thought was, okay, so this is why nobody ever picks me to be on their team in poker. I stood there laughing, seeing for the first time my true self and appreciating the beauty of my imperfection. I was a little lost and broken when I made my first trip to Peru, blaming myself for being so heartless as to leave my kind ex-partner of 7 years just because it didn't feel right. I tortured myself over it. And then one day, whilst volunteering at an orphanage, I noticed this cute little 6-year-old boy looking up at me with a big smile on his face, full of love and unspeakable joy, despite the fact his parents had abandoned him due to drug addiction. It melted my heart, and the unrelenting pain vanished in seconds, to be replaced by a warmth and concern for this vulnerable little boy who, without knowing me, gave me his heart so unconditionally. It taught me the importance of compassion, both for myself and others, to be the light in what can sometimes appear to be a dark world. Maybe some of you have experienced this, when you felt a little lost, but you've intuitively found your way by loving somebody deeply. Self-awareness is one thing, but how do you find the courage to start questioning the notion of happiness? Somebody asked me once. I had no choice. The deepest part of myself always found a way of revealing itself in the most unexpected and inconvenient ways. Once it was falling in a puddle just before a job interview and not having the strength to get up. Other times, disturbed dreams. I was grateful when I started to trust and understand my intuition. At least now I know I'm not the crazy, clumsy person I once thought I was. But I didn't want to live a slave to my unconscious thoughts and feelings, not knowing when they were next going to emerge and start questioning my every decision in life. I wanted control over my life, not for my life to control me. I started to experiment ways of doing this. I found the most effective to be mindfulness, reframing my experiences and confronting the dark side of my unconsciousness that often tried to hide from me. Was that woman who just cut in front of me really an evil witch? Or was she a kind mother that was running late to pick up her kids? Maybe some of you have experienced this, when you've jumped to the wrong conclusion in the heat of the moment. How do you think you could have reacted differently? With practice and patience, I learned to connect with my real self. Like a wise old lady, my higher consciousness guided me to answer my own questions about life and the world. I even started to enjoy it, coming up with a different question every day. Why am I so sensitive? Why can't the world live in peace? Am I beautiful? This was life-changing. My anxieties and depression were often caused by my insecurities about whether I was good enough, rich enough, beautiful enough. But I realized the answers to these questions could not be answered by my friends, family, society. They must be answered by me. This gave me the confidence to confront my biggest insecurities, and I decided to set up an experiment. I donated my travel budget to slum children in India, and I traveled across 8 countries in 1 month with no money. Inspired by a hunter-gatherer tribe that I'd stayed with, I adopted some of their survival techniques. I also opened my mind to the helping hand of strangers, something that would have terrified the old Rhinal, who associated strangers with the men that had followed and attacked her whilst living in London. But the new Rhinal somehow managed to open the heart of the most unexpected people by believing in them and showing them trust. I won't pretend. It was by far the hardest thing that I've ever done. But by making it home safely with no money, what did I have left to fear? I'd experienced homelessness, not having any food, and hardest of all for a highly sensitive person, rejection and criticism. By overcoming my biggest fears, I realized, in fact, there was nothing to fear at all. That was just my mind playing tricks on me. In reality, there's often a solution. This enlightenment gave me the freedom to choose the life I wanted to live. I decided to set up my own charity called The Pursuit of Happiness. According to psychologists, self-actualization, or finding yourself, is the peak of true happiness. But for most of us, it takes a highly emotional event before we find the courage to wake up and see the world with fresh eyes. What I'm proposing through this charity is, let's not wait for tragedy to strike. You might remember the words of Steve Jobs on his sickbed. In the light of impending death, all of my wealth becomes meaningless. I believe that world peace starts with your peace and your happiness. inner light begins with you, and then it can emerge into an outer might that has no limits. In an increasingly narcissistic world, it's easy to stray far away from your true self, and it takes a lot of hard work and failures to confront your demons and pull yourself back to your core. These challenges, although difficult at the time, rewarded me with more wealth than all the money in the world. A Mexican artist recently captured my journey to self-actualization in this painting collage, a visual representation of my mission to finding pure happiness and inner contentment by balancing my body, mind, and soul. This is very different from the old Rhinal, who relied on desires and sensual pleasures. I believe that real exploration isn't just about finding new landscapes. It's also about discovering the real you. In the words of philanthropist and entrepreneur Jeff Bezos, the only real danger in life is not evolving. So I appeal to you here and now to join me in taking one step forward. I'd like to finish by asking, how positive do you think your mental health is? And do you feel you're living a life that's true to your heart? What do you think you can do this week to improve your true happiness? What do you want your legacy to be? To ensure that we start as we mean to go on, I devised an exercise. Some of you might be a little bit unsure about joining in. So if you agree to give it a try, I will make you a promise. If you don't like it, I promise you never have to do it again. If you do like it, that's great. You have a ready-made, available anywhere, check up your sleeve, and all for the grand price of 0. So are you ready? Close your eyes. Smile. And create an image of true happiness in your mind. What do you see? Is there a sound or a deep silence? Once you have the image in your mind, I'd like you to start breathing deeply from your diaphragm, slowly, in and out, in and out. Observe the images and the thoughts and feelings that come to mind, and let them go, non-judgmentally. I'm going to leave you in silence for a few seconds. Keep breathing in and out. You might not find your answer to true happiness immediately, but I'm confident with practice and patience you will find your outer might through inner light. Thank you.